Space, the final frontier, ever-expanding outwards, grand vistas of blackness, dotted with stars, just waiting to be conquered, waiting for adventure, waiting for you. That sort of adventure of sci-fi pulp awesomeness, you can't really find it in the sci-fi TTRPGs that I really want to play, because I love TTRPGs, I love sci-fi, but I can't really find anything along the lines of sci-fi adventure without dipping into things like really rules-light sort of systems or really rules-intensive systems, ones that have explicit inclusion of magic and other kinds of things. I thought, why don't I create what I've always wanted to play in regards to sci-fi and adventure? Perhaps the idea of someone sitting here talking about their in-progress sci-fi TTRPG system doesn't sound like the most sexy content in the world. Just give me some time, just a little bit of your time, to go through some of my favourite concepts and ideas and design choices that I'm putting into my sci-fi TTRPG system, Blaster. Blaster gets its title because I love one-word titles, but also I think it is quite emblematic of what I want from this sci-fi system. Because, as I say, I've seen a bunch of sci-fi systems, but they either go incredibly rules light and they don't really shoot for sci-fi really too much, or they're really rules intensive, or they're really serious and really, like, straight-faced. And you might think, well, that's perfect for sci-fi. And it is! Hard sci-fi is very good for the sort of serious contemplation of life's many questions and the what-ifs that sci-fi truly encapsulates. While that is the case, I really would love to make a system where you get to be an adventurer. Blaster at its core is about adventure and action. Action-adventure, if you will. And when I say action, I don't mean fight, fight, fight all the time. I mean, no. Action. Things happening. Things occurring. Action keeping on going. Action continuing. Action rising. Action falling, but mostly rising. The title is one word long because it's supposed to be rules right. It's not supposed to be rules light, where it's missing things and you feel like it's kind of empty in places. It's not rule intensive and it's too much for your brain. It's rules right. That means that it's got the right amount of rules to actually have things happen and things to work, but also the amount of words being used. It's not overly written. It's not underwritten, so you're left wondering what's going on. And it has its own lore and setting. And I bring this up because I've seen a lot of games at the moment that have their own mechanics and they're really cool to play, but they can feel quite empty at times. They're quite empty voids, if you will, because they don't really have a personality. They don't have a soul. They don't have lore behind it. They don't have lore and mechanics mixing into an image in your mind and your brain and something to play. It's just some dice and how they work, and it's kind of just left in the air. Meanwhile, the setting of the setting of Blaster, has been thought out in terms of whole systems that you can use. You can pick up a planet, run an entire adventure on one planet. You can dart between them. There are things that have its own original FTL sort of transport system, because I feel like if you're going to have a sci-fi with your own setting, you're going to have to think of your own way of FTL travel around the star systems. There's all this stuff, and there's plenty of resources for you to use to make your own planets. There's a whole table in here that just has a bunch of concepts for planets, including things like Earth. The people of Earth try to come here and make a second Earth after they kind of ruined their first one, so they made a bunch of flora and fauna that we're used to on Earth, but for some reason they started to grow exponentially, so now anyone that goes there has to survive Jurassic Park style against massive chickens. But with that being said, let's go over some of the core concepts with the mechanics that I feel like are quite interesting when it comes to using Blaster for yourself. First of all, if you're a player, you're going to make your own character, but the character creation steps are not complicated at all, but they're also not really rules light in terms of just roll some things and boom, here's your character, and they're kind of just loosey-goosey. The system of Blaster for creating characters includes stuff like your class, your trope or theme, your origin, your species, and more of these stuff to help build the little details about your character. And one thing that I try to do from the outset is make a bunch of these things in this game be run through tables. Not they require tables to function, but if you have things like your class choice, for example, you're going to roll a d4. Your tropes, you're going to roll a d12. If you want to roll for your species, you can, because you can just roll a d12 because there's 12 species. Your origins, roll a d10. Your skills, well, there's 50 skills and 4 categories of those skills, so you can just roll on those different tables to figure out what you have in terms of your skills. Even the weapons, the handguns, there's 4 of them. There's 4 miscellaneous ones. There are 3 Shotguns, there's 4 shotguns. So you can roll these different dice to figure out which of these you want if you want to make a character incredibly quick and just rely on the dice to make a character for you. And each one of these choices, like your class, your trope, your species, your origin, they give you an ability for you to use. They have a significant ability that actually changes how you play in some ways. The origins can give you stuff like how you interact with the world. For example, if you take the punk/rebel origin, you can get stuff like, you know someone who can really help. That sort of Rogue One sort of idea of, we need someone to help us get through. I know the guy that can help us get through. That sort of vibe. Meanwhile, if you have the bureaucrat origin, you know how to get around the what's that word? Bureaucratic systems to help you get around. You can sort of bend the rules a bit. You can use things to your advantage. You can influence employees of similar mega corporations to get by. None of these choices end up with you having to do admin to work out how your character works with all these different numbers for what your skills are. It's very simple. But as we say that, let's talk about the stats of the game. When you make a dice roll, you're going to be considering which of your stats you're going to be rolling against. And there are 4 of them. There's your brawn, there's your agility, there's your mind, and there's your will. Your brawn is your strength, your hardiness, your endurance, your toughness, your constitution, that kind of thing. Your agility is your speed, your swiftness, your sneakiness, your ability to nimbly sort of interact with stuff. Your mind is your mental acuity, your knowledge, but also how you apply said knowledge, like astronavigation, navigation, investigation, exobiology, that kind of thing. And your will is your charisma, your confidence, your sense of will, your willpower, that kind of thing. And character creation is super simple. You're going to get a d12, a d10, a d8, and a d6. You have 4 stats and 4 dice. Choose which of these stats you want these dice to go in. And, here's a tip, bigger is better in this instance. So if you want to be a super smart boy, put your d12 into mind. If you want to be quite weak, put your d6 into brawn and put the other ones where you want. Boom, we've just chosen our stats. No need to roll things, no complicated, nothing like that. You just get 4 dice, you put them in, there we go, there's my character. So how do you make a roll? Well, first of all, as I said, you're going to consider which of your stats you're using. Are you potentially lifting something up? Are you thinking of what to do next? Are you trying to convince someone? Well, you're going to consider your brawn, your mind, your will, that sort of thing. And then, once you do that, you consider which dice you're using. Oh, I'm good at lifting things, so I'm going to use a d12. Then, the GM says, okay, you have that dice to use, and you have to consider what I say, which is the difficulty of the roll. The difficulty of a roll is dependent on the GM. If they think the task is quite easy, you get a d12, because easy is a d12. Meanwhile, extreme difficulty, which is the 4th and highest kind of difficulty, is a d6. If you look at that then, we have the best you can get in terms of your stat is a d12, the easiest difficulty is a d12, meanwhile, your worst stat is a d6, and the hardest difficulty is a d6. This scale of the dice means that in any dice roll, you're going to pick one of these dice and one of these dice and roll them together. So, let's say it's an easy brawn roll. Cool, I roll a d12 and a d12. You grab those and roll them together. What does that mean? Well, in any dice roll, you're trying to roll a 5 or higher on either dice. Well, on both dice, ideally, because there are 3 types of results in Blaster. Failure, success, and triumph. The reason for this is, I've seen other sci-fi systems and other systems in general having quite minute and quite intricate or too open in terms of what they do with their dice. We have D20 systems, we have dice-facing systems along the lines of the Edge of the Empire systems, that kind of thing. And I wanted to have a system that is really easy and the results that you get further action at all times. And when I say that, I've seen a bunch of systems that say that all the rolls in this system further the action always. But in practice, they can make players feel like, oh, well, we've lost, we can't do anything, and the action stops. Let me explain what I mean. The results in Blaster are failure, success, and triumph. What does failure mean? So, you want to attempt something, you try to lift the thing, oh, but you can't. Well, if you fail in Blaster, you don't do what you want to do, but you also get a boon, aka something good happens to sort of help you along. So you don't succeed what you need to do, but then something good happens to change the situation, or you can follow that thread to hopefully keep the action moving. You don't do what you need to do, but something else happens, so let's do that instead. That kind of thing. Success kind of works the opposite. Success means, yeah, you do things. You do the thing that you want to do. Cool, you lift the box. But something bad happens. Perhaps you strain to make a noise and the guard hears you. Maybe you try to move through somewhere stealthily and you do succeed, but you leave tracks behind you that would be too sort of complicated to try and rub them out. Meaning, yeah, you get past, but now people can follow you. That sort of thing. And the third kind of result is triumph, aka you succeed and that's it. You succeed and you keep going. All three of these options, they further the action. If you were to, for example, fail and have something bad happen, that would mean that I don't succeed and something else happens to hammer me down at the floor so I don't succeed even more. Meanwhile, triumph means you succeed in what you need to do. The action continues because you did the thing and you move on. Success means I did the thing and I move on, but something bad happens. So I do the thing I want to do, but then something bad happens to sort of add to the situation. I fail, which means that, oh no, I don't do the thing, but then something else happens to carry me forward. All three of these options enable action to continue, and it works. As opposed to, I want to further this situation with the dice rolls, but there's some dice rolls that just stop the action entirely. So you roll your 2 dice, you have your d12 and your d12. So I roll it, bang, I got 1 5. Or at least at 1 5 plus. On one dice I got a 7, the other one I got a 3, unlucky. That means I got a success, because how it works is, if you roll your 2 dice, and neither of them get a 5 plus, then, oh no, that's a fail. If only one of them gets a 5 plus, that's a success. If both of them get a 5 plus, then you succeed. And you might think that rolling 2d12s would almost guarantee that you're going to get a 5 plus on both, but you would be surprised, and you'd be especially surprised if I told you that, you know, dice are random. Dice are random, especially when you're not trying to add the results together, but when they're separate agents of chaos. When you've got 2 dice that roll separately to each other, trying to get a 5 plus, then each result is completely random, but each result furthers the action, so it's fine. And you have to consider, not every single roll you do is going to be using d12s. Maybe characters would like to use their own skills and their own stats, therefore they're going to use their higher dice, but the GM has complete control over what difficulty the task is. And of course, the GM's not supposed to be like, oh, you've succeeded too much, I'm going to make everything that you do now hard and extreme. No, you use like what is legitimately correct as to what the task is. Like, oh, it's an easy task, yeah, cool. It's another one, that's cool. Here's more easy rolls that you're going to make, but when it is extreme, yeah, roll a d6 as opposed to a d12. But, of course, the player might engage in a situation where they don't have the right skill, or they're not good at persuasion, that kind of thing. Meanwhile, they need to be really good in order to get that triumph, because if not, they're going to succeed, which might lead to something bad happening. But here's the thing. This whole idea of triumph being the only one that is like the good one, because you succeed and that's it, because success is success with a caveat, and failure is, well, you fail, even if something good happens. Let me just tell you, in practice, those 3 results are amazing for storytelling, and they feel really good as a player, because what are the options? I succeed, even if something bad happens, which makes the situation more interesting, and I fail, but something else happens that makes the situation more interesting to help me along. These results are super fun for creating an ever-evolving story, and to allow players to kind of roll with their failures and successes. And that's how dice rolls work in Blaster. It's super simple. You just roll these 2 dice. How good are you, and how difficult is the situation? And here's the thing, there's also another level. If you roll the same number and succeed, that's called a positive twist, which means that something extra good can happen. It's like a critical success, if you think of it like that. But also, if you roll underneath, so you get like a 4 on both dice, that's a negative twist, which means something very bad can happen, which is like a crit fail. And there's something else to consider, and that is combat. Because you might think, okay, how does combat work with a system where success is determined not by hitting an AC, for example, but it's what you actually roll. You've not got something like Call of Cthulhu where, oh, if I roll on like, I don't know, like if I roll underneath my number, then I succeed in hitting someone. What do you do for the difficulty for hitting an enemy? Is it based on like the situation? Well, it can be, but it's more specifically about the enemy difficulty. Enemies in Blaster don't have CR ratings. There's not all this really complex number crunching. Instead, they're more categorical. You have easy, medium, hard, extreme, but you also have things like, are they mooks, sort of minion-like characters? Are they ranged ones, demolition guys? Are they tanks? All these sort of considerations are baked in. But if you want to have a fight against a medium enemy, then that means they're going to have a medium difficulty, which means to hit them, you need to get a medium difficulty dice, like a D8, and whatever dice you're rolling with. Roll them together and try and get a 5+. I just realised a medium difficulty dice is a D10, not a D8, sorry. And in combat, if you succeed, you get one 5+, great. That means you hit and you deal your damage of the weapon or whatever you're doing. If you succeed and you get a triumph instead, oh great. That means you not only hit, but you deal double damage. Whatever the damage of the weapon is, for example, it might deal 3 damage. That means if you roll a triumph, you deal 6 damage instead. Anything that you roll for the base damage, it's always doubled when you get a triumph. This is super simple in terms of, oh, what to add on to that to make it matter more. Like, should I add just a flat, like, +2 or +3 or your weapon or your level or... Nope, none of that. It's just whatever double the dice, not double the damage of the weapon is. Meanwhile, if you roll in combat to attack an enemy and you fail, what does that mean? Oh, I just fail and move on? No. In Blaster and Sanctum, now that I think about it, in these systems, when you fail in combat, you can still do something called a momentum action, because it means that not only do you fail, but you know how outside of combat, if you fail, something good happens? It's the same thing in combat. You fail, and something else happens. Your momentum actions come from your class and your trope, and you get to pick one of each when you make a character, which means at level 1, you have 2 options for when you fail. For example, if you were a techie, for example, you might have an ability to help out an ally when you fail. Meanwhile, if you have the Bastion, the Atomic, the Debonair, the Voyager, the Wrangler trope, if you choose one of these, then they have their own momentum action, like moving around an enemy, blocking someone, giving someone temporary cover from attacks. There's so many different momentum options that you can choose, but it's building all these options together and creating your own sort of cool character in combat that can operate not only being able to attack, but also when they fail, they can still help out their allies and change the situation. One of them is so cool, it's called Use Surroundings, which means even if you fail, you get to deal damage by improvising around. You get to kind of tell a story as to what you do. For example, if you have a gun and you're in a place with like light sources, what have you, you could say, okay, what I'm going to do is I shoot, but I miss. Oh no, but I accidentally hit behind him a pipe that spews out a bunch of steaming gas that gets all over them, and I deal a bunch of fire damage because a bunch of hot steam is going to hurt. Maybe not as much as being shot, but it's kind of this caveat which is called Use Surroundings. You could shoot a candle off a wall if you're in a very primitive area and cover someone in fire. You might knock off I'm trying to think, like a what would you even call that? Like a beaker of acid onto someone and get acid all over them. All sorts of options, really fun stuff you can do, even when you fail in this system. And while we're talking about combat, I want to say that it's very similar to how Sanctum works, because I like how those systems worked. It feels like they're becoming my own little flavour of how TTRPG systems work when they're made by me, and you can watch the videos on how combat works and how Sanctum works here. But in terms of combat in Blaster, when it comes around to your turn, you get 2 types of actions. You get a quick action and a main action, which might sound familiar if you've seen other games, but trust me, it kind of comes together. A main action is kind of like you can do anything. You can do any of the listed actions with a main action. Meanwhile, a quick action, normally you're going to do stuff like take the move action. But there are other abilities that you can get which change main action abilities into quick actions, like being able to hide as a quick action. Sounds quite fun for a rogue, right? You know, it's kind of that usual sort of action turns into a bonus action sort of vibe. But with these 2 actions, it means that really in combat, when it comes to your turn, you might move with a quick action and use a main action to attack. And that's your turn. Now that sounds quite, well, it would sound quite boring if you didn't know about all the abilities that weapons that you as a character can have through choosing abilities, all these different things that give you options to add onto your attack, alternative attacks that you can make, different actions for AoE, tossing grenades, pushing people, smashing them through walls with push actions, pushing them into the oblivion of space in zero gravity. You could shoot down at something with a blaster and knock yourself across with zero gravity. All sorts of really cool stuff can happen in the bounds of this game with all these little actions, because it means that this main action becomes the main interesting thing that you do on your turn, and it might be bolstered by your quick action, or you might just use your quick action to get in out of cover, blast, and then get back in for a very scrappy sort of feel. And when I say abilities that you can use, there is an extra thing to consider in Blaster. I said it's all about action, it's all about adrenaline, it's about explosive combat and action keep on going. Well, in Blaster, there is a meta currency which is called action points. Action points are really simple. You get them whenever you make a roll that is like an action roll, outside of combat and inside of combat. Meaning, if you go outside of combat and you make rolls and you succeed, well, you're going to get action points to use in combat or to use your abilities outside of combat. There's all sorts of uses for action points. When you make an action roll, if you succeed, you're going to get 2 action points. If you triumph, you get 3. If you fail, you get 1 as a little consolation prize. But when it comes to having those points, you can spend them in a number of ways. For example, you can spend 5 in combat to take an additional main action. Which means, in combat, if you think, I want another action, I'm going to spend 5 of these points, and now I can take another action to take another shot, and maybe even get more action points if you wanted to. But a bunch of stuff includes ways to use action points. There are weapons like the revolver where you can spend action points to let off more shots against someone, like Cassius? What's his name? What was the guy's name after they changed it because the employee they based his name off was bad in Overwatch? There are hammers and weapons that can knock people back. There are whips that can either grab someone or reel them in. You can use them to twist around the combat to hit a bunch of people at once. You can daze someone with a whip strike. All sorts of things you can do with your action points. You can gain actions. You can use class abilities like the Bastion ability, which gives you the ability to, when you take damage, spend action points to reduce the damage you take, turning you into a real tank on the battlefield. And when it comes to tanking damage, you might be thinking, well, how does that work? How does health work and damage work? How does all this work? Well, there's no ACs. People don't roll to see if they can hit each other because all of the rolls are based on your abilities as characters. How difficult is the enemy chooses one dice, and how good you are as a player chooses the other dice, and you roll them together to see if you hit. Meanwhile, the enemies, they don't roll to hit, they just hit, which might sound overpowered, because what? I want to be able to get out the way or have a chance of them not hitting me? Well, in combat, your character gets to choose, well, you get to choose for your character, a build. There are 3 builds. There's a light build, a medium build, and a heavy build. A light build means that you have less in the way of damage reduction. Meanwhile, heavy, you have more. But there's more to this, because damage reduction is a way in which you reduce damage. Who would have thought? But when you take damage, you have a passive amount of damage reduction. If you have a heavy build, you can reduce 3 damage each time you take damage. So if an enemy is rolling for damage and rolls a d6, they roll it, I rolled a 3. That means you took no damage, which means you actually have a very high tolerance for damage, and it's not like a damage threshold thing where, oh no, the person actually dealt 4 to me, which means I actually take 4 damage. No, if they roll 4 damage and you have 3 damage reduction, you take 1. You take 1 damage, you got all this armor, you're so bulky and cool. You are a tank with just this one choice of a build. But you might be thinking, well, why would I choose light build then? Well, if you choose light build, you're faster because you're lighter, you're more nimble. So, when you have a heavy build, you're much slower. And I haven't talked about the third one in the middle, medium. If you have 3 reduction from being heavy, if you have 1 damage reduction from being light, medium means you have 2. Movement, in terms of heavy, is 20 feet, because you're so bulky and you have big weapons and you have a big axe to hit people. If you're light, you have 40 feet. And if you're medium, you have 30. Medium is the sort of nice in-betweeny spot But there's also a third thing to consider with your builds. If you have a heavy build, you can carry more stuff. You can carry a number of items equal to the maximum result on your brawn dice plus 2. If you're light, it's that number minus 2. And if you're medium, it's just the maximum result on your brawn dice. There's also things like shields, which allow you to increase the amount of damage that you reduce by taking an action off your turn to reduce even more, which means you can tank even more. And shields can be weapons as well. You can hit people with them, and there are different kinds of shields. There's one shield that allows you to spend another action to reduce even more, making it very reliable. There's another shield called a laser shield, which lets you reflect damage like you're holding a lightsaber. You can bang! You can like raise up the shield and a blaster goes off it, and it can work with all kinds of bullets, not just lasers that hit you. You have a shock shield, which means that when you get hit, you can blast it in a bunch of electricity, hit someone nearby. And there's a tower shield, which gives you a passive +1 damage reduction, which means you can have a massive shield and hold it there, and now your big heavy 3 damage reduction goes up to 4. If you have a tower shield, you're already very slow, and with the tower shield there is a caveat that it gives you a snag, which is like a disadvantage if you want to think about that, on your agility rolls, but it means that you are incredibly tanky with this shield, which means that you can be an excellent bastion while the other guys get out their blasters and their sniper rifles and start shooting people while you're at the front, taking it like a space marine. I chose to have builds instead of another list of just more equipment and lots of very intricate levels of like, oh, I want light armor, gambesons, and heavy armor, instead of all these different kinds and little intricate changes. I just want to have it so there's 3 kinds of builds, fitting the 3 kinds of characters you might want to go for, and these builds are not limited to what class and trope you pick. You could pick the Vox, which is your sort of axiom using... think of it like the ability to change reality. That's what an axiom is. You can use axiom-like abilities. Think of it like a Jedi, if you want to sort of like manipulate people's mind, but you can also cause things to set on fire. You can rewrite reality and say, oh, that thing that's not on fire? Yeah, it's on fire now. That sort of thing. You could be a Vox, which you might think of like a space wizard. You can be a heavy build Vox and be really slow, but be really damage reducing while you start slinging out all these axioms. Meanwhile, you could be a rogue with damage reduction of 3 with a heavy build. You could be a warrior with only light. You could be a techie if you wanted to. You might think, oh, like a techie nerd with a big drone next to them, helping them out and doing sort of supportive tasks. You might think, oh, they have light build, but you could be a big hulking heavy build techie who has a drone with them while they have a massive sniper rifle or a massive shotgun, while their abilities are all about supporting their allies. You can make a bunch of different awesome builds along with all the different weapons that you can pick up. There are shotguns, handguns, rifles, there's even longbows. There are launchers, there are grenade launchers. There are heavy weapons like rocket launchers and machine guns. There are miniguns you can pick up. There are even melee weapons like chainsaws. There are one-handed handsaws you can pick up, which is a handsaw like a chainsaw and not just a handsaw. There are things like daggers you might be expectant of. There are knives and bowie knives that you can use along the lines of what we're used to in terms of kinetic type melee weapons. There are energy weapons, there are flails, there are whips that I've mentioned that are crackling with sparks. There are laser whips, there are laser gauntlets, there are knuckle dusters. There's all sorts of ways that you can customize your character without having to consider what kinds of, all this different armor stuff that you have. Instead, how can you reduce? How fast are you? And how much can you carry? When really, in character creation, if you ask a player, hey, what does your character look like? They typically describe their face, their skin colour, their eyes, their hair, what features they have because of their species or their ancestry, whatever it is. No one really spends like ages unless it's like really specific about their character's class or abilities. Like their ability gives them some way to bolster their like stuff if they're like a D&D artificer, for example. Otherwise, people just say, oh, it's light armor, and move on. So, why consider all the intricacies of things like what armor you have if I could just give people the ability to go, right, today you have heavy build, but tomorrow you could pick a light build instead. You can customize what you want and use that level of customizability to just go, right, what does your armor look like? Well, It could be anything. We're a sci-fi world. It could be literally patches of wooden armor that I've got myself because I'm a rugged sort of like guy that like hides in the woods because I got stranded on a planet. You could go for that vibe, or you could go for the heavy sort of Space Marine or Cylon or Mass Effect armor, all this different stuff, and have a heavy armor. The stuff that's got like big glowing nodules all over it and big bolt heads and big like snapping up helmets. All the stuff that you can use and just customize and decide how it looks and just say, that's a heavy build. To give you the flavor, give you the customization, this rules right approach, instead of all this intricacy and also not rules light. I want to give you the ability to customize, choose what you want, to build the character that you've always wanted to create. This action adventure hero with a cape on his back and a blaster in hand. I want you guys to have that power in your hands and not have to be bordered down with rules, have to sit with a very grim or just depressing atmosphere. I want fun stuff. Fun fact, tomorrow I'm going to be running a playtest of this system, and in that, one of the players is a rogue, a voyager, and a something else, I forget. But as a result, they have 6 skills to start off with, which sounds like, well, okay, you've got 6 skills. 6 skills is a lot of skills in this system, compared to the fact that as a base level, you get 2. But he's made all the choices to give him the most amount of skills, which means that when he makes a roll, including that skill, he gets an advantage on the roll, which makes it even easier. So he really is a roguish expert in what he does, and he's more likely to succeed as he goes along. And alongside your choice of which class you want to pick, you can also choose your trope. You have things like the atomic, which is your ability to manipulate space and time. You have things like the chrono, which is your space magic, but you also have things that are more mundane, like the wrangler, which gives you the ability to be either a marshal, a rogue, a vox, or a techie, and have a pet with you. It could be like a robo dog. It could be an alien. It could be a sprat from the outworld. Whatever you want. It could be a big alien gorilla. All sorts of stuff that you can just pick. You have stuff like the debonair, which is an excellent trope, which gives you the ability to gain more action points as you use it. There are things where you can take more risky plays to gain more action points. You can give out quippy one-liners when you kill someone to sort of intimidate their enemies and give the rest of your allies action points. It's a very supportive but quite debonair Zorro sort of fighting style character. There are the likes of the Bastion, which turns you into a heavy tank sort of character who can wield shields like Captain America and make ranged attacks with them. There are things like the Tactician, which gives you the ability as a base to move people around the battlefield whenever you start combat. There are all sorts. There's the espionage one, which gives you the ability, regardless of your class, to go a bit more in the lines of hacking and being stealthy. That sort of cyber attack hacker sort of guy, or going invisible whenever you hide. This sort of really cool choice that you can go for with class and trope and mix them together however you want alongside your build to create even more interesting customizable characters. Then there are your origins, which include things like, are you a bureaucrat? Are you an outworlder who isn't really included with all this politics of the main setting? Are you a punk/rebel who fights against it? Are you a fighter/soldier? Are you a noble sort of thing? Are you a elite character? Are you high-ranking idle, or are you a low-bound punk rebel? All these options you can go for to really make it cool. You've got outlaws, sorry. You've got bounty hunters and mercenaries. All sorts of these, and there's 10 origins you can go for, and it gives you a significant ability. The ability, if you're an outworlder, to be quite resourceful. You reach into your pack and go, oh, I've got an item that might be able to help us. You could be a mercenary, and you're very good at picking off particular targets. You choose an entity type, like humanoids, for example, or just folk, as it's called, the people that are considered the sort of alien races from Star Wars, the people who have intelligence and who run the world. You can choose those, and you have an even easier time hitting them, regardless of what difficulty the enemy is. These origins, they give you a significant ability, and not just, oh, I get skills and some shoes, and an ability that we'll probably never use in the game. Like, oh, I can contact the church and ask for a place to stay. Cool. And then we have the species. There are 12 species. There used to be 20, but I looked at them and thought, these 8 kind of don't have a significant feel at the moment, but I might include them back in if I can think of something very cool to have in, because the 12 that I've got here are very interesting indeed. Of course, we have things like the human, which you might think is boring. Why would I want to play a sci-fi setting and play a human? But If you think that, you might like playing the human and choose the forgettable ability, which gives you the ability to be able to go, humans are boring and have quite forgettable faces, so with my forgettable ability, if I'm there in a situation, unless I was quite outspoken or I was the only one in a situation, people will probably forget I was there, and you can kind of get away with things. You could be a forgettable human rogue and be able to go in, steal something, leave, and no one even thought that you were there in the vicinity to even attempt to try and steal the thing. That kind of thing. You might like that as a human, but of course, there are weird species and they're amazing. There are things like the alloys, which is the name for if you want to play a robot. They're quite hardy. You have things like the brachus, which are crab and lobster people. If you like the likes of big, heavy, Mirelurk dudes who've got like claws and can hit people and scrap, they've got a warrior culture, they like to lie underwater, they can breathe underwater obviously, and you might think that, or you might think Futurama, Dr. Zoidberg, and there's an ability called molting, because crabs can molt, they molt their exoskeletons all the time. You can molt your exoskeleton, your carapace, and when you do so, it says whenever you are grabbed, restrained, lingering, there's all these different afflictions. If you have one of them, or you take damage, you can just choose to eject your carapace, and suddenly you're a little, like, gum boy who's just, like, all soft and squishy, new skin, like, I'm all stretchy, like the inside of when you, like, take out the meat from a crab claw, you can be like that and have no protection, but all of your damage reduction goes away until you finish a respite. But also, while you're in that situation, all the listed afflictions that you might have, you are immune to all of them. So you are immune to all these effects. Things like, think of the likes of like, prone and restrained. All these things, you're immune to all these, but all your damage reduction goes down until you take a rest and you regrow your carapace. The brachus is super fun. It went from just like boring sort of Klingon military honor boys to you could potentially be a really funny Dr. Zoidberg character. If you're like me, you will love the Almatesh. The Almatesh are like cockroach people. When they start off, they're quite human-like, but as they get older, they become more wizened and cockroach-like. If you look at them closely, they have segments instead of just a connected forearm and bicep kind of thing. In between, the joint is more like an insect. When you look at their mouths real closely, they have a line, and that's because their mouths split at the chin to have ant-like mandibles. They're quite horrifying to behold, but quite cool when you see them amidst armour and with a blaster in their hand. And they are ferocious. They, when they are wounded, when they're at half health or lower, they start to go lambent and they attack even better because they have advantage on attack rolls. They're incredible in combat, and they have a spiritual connection to their home planet, which they call Almeta, or the All-Mother. There's a lot of interesting sort of lore that goes into like the creation of all these characters, and it's really fun to build a character around being a Dr. Zoidberg sort of character, being a robot, and being someone like the Almatesh and having a spiritual connection, even if you think it is just intrinsically a spiritual thing that you sort of believe in and not a physical manifestation of any sort of like weird space magic. None of that. It can just be something that you believe in, your strength and wanting to protect your home planet. There are guys like the Bauble. The Bauble are four-armed, two-legged, Stitch-like character, like Gremlins, Stitch. They're like big barrels that like kind of stand there with their arms out like this, big black goofy eyes and big lines of mouths. The cutest of them have their little blep like a dog kind of comes out. They're like little chihuahua guys, but they have quite horrifying abilities. Of course they have four arms, but some of them are incredibly strong, like incredibly strong. They count as large creatures even though they are small, like a 3-foot little bean guy. You might have the ability to be able to swallow an object or a creature that is your size or smaller, and they're dead. They're destroyed. You can pick up a dustbin, eat it, and it's gone. Just gone. You can just consume things. They eat things that are really weird. They are creatures that have been made intelligent because they used to be ravenous little weird bug guys on their own planet, but then somehow, for some reason, and no one knows who or why, but they can find labs and notes, but they don't know who made the lab or the notes. This experiment to make baubles intelligent. And there are a bunch of species, but I don't want to sit there and talk about all of them. We have guys that are like animated innate matter from the galaxy that have been awoken by a neutron star. We have Lunites, which are little moth people. We have cyber sims, which are androids, AIs connected to the core. We have all sorts of guys that you would love to play as, and they are really, really cool. And tomorrow, the characters are a Brachus, like a socially awkward Brachus. I can imagine there being some Dr. Zoidberg shenanigans going on. We have a cyber sim who is very much like Lilu from The Fifth Element. Sort of this idea of, yeah, they look like a human, but they're actually manufactured alien sort of intelligence. So they're like Lilu. We have someone who's very much like Boba Fett, who's like a rogue, but they are an exomote, which is the sort of, as I say, the innate matter that is awoken by a neutron star. And the final person is a bureaucrat as their origin, but their species is the Throng. The Throng are nanobots that form into a central hive mind, and they create a central personality. There are a bunch of these tiny little bots, or even bigger ones, these big robot insects that form into a central mass, and kind of together form. You can't grab them because they can just move around your limbs. Some of them can even move through walls because they are these, like, just, again, banded together nanobots that come together as one central being. And yeah, that's who they're playing tomorrow. So, yeah, let's see how those 4 heroes manage to heist and find a bunch of credits from a bank. And I could go on forever. There are different tiers of items. There are vehicles. There's, again, lore on how things work in terms of going faster than light. It's not faster than light. You sort of teleport. You swap your atoms, your baryons, through the galaxy, all sorts of things that go into the lore. There are things like stasis pods, mechanics around stasis pods and how they work. There's mechanics for hacking, and it's quite simple. There's things for security. We have hazards of all different kinds, and helping the GM improvise their own hazards and incorporate them into encounters of a certain difficulty. There are things to help GMs make their own planets. There are existing lore to help you explore and create interesting stuff for your players to encounter. There's all sorts. There are things for travel. There's things for space travel. There's all sorts of things that you can incorporate into your game to have a super fun, super pulpy, super adventure-focused sci-fi adventure without it getting too rules light, rules comprehensive, or kind of depressing. It's fun-focused, it's quick, it's nimble, it's explosive, and it's super, super fun. And I think you're going to like it. But until I get all the playtesting done that I'm doing at the moment and sort of build more stuff up to get to the point where I go, right, let's give people the resources to play this game on their own. Until then, I will hope that you will subscribe, you'll give a like, you'll stick around to hear more about Blaster, because it's right now one of the things that I really want to do. Ever since I started to make TTRPGs, I thought I want to make a sci-fi system to make people want to play sci-fi again, because there's so much in the way of fantasy, but there's not much in the way of sci-fi, because there's this quite serious and intimidating perception of sci-fi. People think of space and think, oh god, I need to be like an astrophysicist to know how to play these games. And no, I want the exact opposite. I want everyone to be able to play these games. I want everyone to have sci-fi adventures with capes on their back, stormtrooper like helmets on their head after killing a bunch of them. Anyway, as I say, if you like the sound of this, please leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to hear more about me, my channel, Blaster, the things that I'm creating, that kind of thing. It would help a lot if you would share this around as well. But until then, when this comes out, it'll be November the 1st, so I hope that you've had a great Halloween. And with that, I love you all, and I'll see you next time.